For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. First of all, Asia is a bit mixed this morning. What people there are trying to do is to work out whether the various factory order numbers are actually showing that they're digesting all that. They're trying to work out whether or not various economies are growing. Australia PMI's up to 49.2. Now, again, this is not 50, which is a sign of growth, but it's sort of getting there. Hong Kong's up marginally, China's down marginally, but a lot of digesting going on of this factory information. Some corporate news from China. And Ant, which is the China fintech company, is teaming up with the NBA, which is the US organizer of basketball, as you probably know. They're starting what they describe as a strategic partnership, which will involve video content. Fans in China will pay for that through the very popular Alipay, which is part of Ant, and so on. It was taken off Chinese television for 18 months because of comments made by an NBA person about China's record of human rights in Hong Kong. But now it's back and it's being seen as a big money spinner for the NBA. It's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, apparently. Now, India has slammed George Soros because he's saying that the Adani scandal, there's Gautam Adani, it'll actually weaken Modi's grip on India and therefore increase democracy in India. Now, some of us might not think that's a bad thing, but certainly the Indian authorities think it is a bad thing and have actually said that it's a calculated attack on India. Meanwhile, India has itself unleashed some emergency legal demands, an emergency law for energy companies, coal plants to boost energy companies to use coal plants to boost power production. The G7, the finance ministers and the central bankers, meet on February the 23rd to talk about Russia. This can be hosted in Japan. That's followed by a G20 meeting in India, and all of that before the May 19 to 21 summit in Hiroshima. So more thoughts about how there might be further sanctions on Russia. Not a lot to say about the United States. I normally do a recap round about this stage in the programme, but it was basically all closed for President's Day yesterday, and the US futures have fallen very, very slightly this morning. But again, no action to report on in the United States. The Ukraine, let's turn our attention to that on this roundabout anniversary of the Russian invasion. They called it a special operation. It's still, apparently, Ukraine is still awaiting 33 billion euros worth of pledges, which were made from various European countries. The total was about 60 billion. They're still awaiting 33. The difficulty is that, for example, the Central Bank of Europe, the central bank there takes about 6 months to process these demands and actually push them through. So Ukraine is still waiting on that. As far as HSBC concerned, just a quick one. The banking reporting season continues. HSBC have recorded record fourth quarter profits, very unsurprisingly, $5.2 billion. I say unsurprisingly simply because it's like every other central bank. It's gaining because of the raise in interest rates, and it will apparently achieve its target, which is a 12% return on equity this year, 2023. UK, now, as we were talking yesterday about this, Rishi Sunak is urging the Eurosceptics and the loyalists in Northern Ireland to try to accept some of the moves that he's made to try to get this trade deal, the Northern Ireland Protocol, in place. What he's done is he's proposing that Northern Ireland have a greater say in what the European central authorities think about Northern Ireland, and that's being discussed at the moment agreement laid before Parliament yesterday, and still lots of discussion to take place. The UK is also being urged to crack down on a regime that actually encourages people to retire early, not so much state-employed people, but private wealthy people who can afford to have their own pension funds. And this, they feel, is eroding the general productivity and getting people back into the workplace. That's from the Resolution Foundation, and that's considered to be quite a hefty charity, and their observations will no doubt be taken on board by many in the finance sector this morning. And back to Sunak, he obviously chosen a very risky course, but we'll have more news on that, I hope, tomorrow at some stage. And as far as oil's concerned, relatively choppy trade, not just about China apparently, but worries about the global economy actually slowing down. So no change there really, but still relatively choppy trade in the oil markets. That is the global view this morning.
So let's look at the managers index that pretty much comes out of Southeast Asia and parts of Australia. There's been a slump in those numbers. And when you dig in critically, a lot of people are pointing at China, COVID recovery from China, and the fact that things are not evening out the way they should be. That's one. Number two will be about the Adani Group and George Soros. We all know that Soros funds an open society in India with billions of naira, to be able to disrupt the democratic process in India. So would you say this is just sour grapes, or Adani has really done something dastardly because he's not been able to defend himself in all of this scandal by the Heidenberg Group? Those are the two questions.
Okay, so first of all, George Soros, what he's actually saying is that if the links, and again, this is an ongoing investigation, but if there are links proved between Gautam Adani and President Narendra Modi in India, it will stifle the democratic process in the country. That's what he appears to be saying. And India's saying, basically, mind your own business, get out of it. He still is seen as a very influential voice as far as international finance is concerned. Whether you agree with what he says or not depends on your point of view. But he certainly made himself very, very clear when the UK was going through its problems with the linking to the Deutschmark and so on, all those years ago. So he's a very influential voice, but India's just saying, listen, George, mind your own business. We'll get on with our business and do it our own way. As far as China and Australia and the rest of it's concerned, again, it's all very mixed is the picture, to be absolutely honest with you. I wish I could be more definite. I can't. I'm just really looking at the figures, and all it's saying to me is the markets are actually poised and they're taking note of what's happening. Australia is gradually pushing through. Hong Kong is gradually pushing through, and China remains a mystery. So I can't take it much further than that. I don't think anybody in the world can right now.
All right, so Michael, ahead of Friday's one-year anniversary of Russia's special military operation into Ukraine, which is the Russians' invasion of Ukraine, financial leaders of the G7 will be meeting on Thursday, and part of what they'll be discussing would be evaluating the effects of sanctions on Russia since last year. Now, President Joe Biden of the US had talked tough when they talked about they were going to bring Russia to their knees through sanctions, and Russia would have no choice but to withdraw from Ukraine. However, almost 1 year later, it hasn't quite happened in the way that they've envisaged. Beyond the US, Germany has spoken up, the United Kingdom has spoken up and given sanctions. So I'd like you to just evaluate the effect of sanctions on wars, particularly in this particular war, and what options are left for the G7 at this point.
I think what the G7 will be talking about, again, I can't speak for them, but I would imagine what they're talking about is the fact that all these pledges were made a long time ago and have not actually arrived. So obviously what the G7 should be talking about, yes, they can talk about sanctions and so on, but I think what they should be talking about is the reconstruction. Because what Europe does not want is both these countries on their knees, and whoever wins may be seen as a potential victor on paper, but perhaps it won't be quite as. In fact, it won't be quite as simple as that. So I think that's what they're discussing. If they've got a vision thing going, then they should be looking beyond the fighting and to what kind of reparations Russia should be making, what kind of repair Russia needs, what kind of repair Ukraine needs as well. That's what the G7 I think will be talking about, because like it or not, they will be bearing the cost of this long after the last guns have ceased firing, as in all wars. That's why they're meeting, and I would hope they're looking forward.
Well, I mean, G7 can meet in Bengaluru this week. Next week, the G20 will meet. They can impose every sanction on Putin, but it doesn't look like Putin is preparing for peace. That's the major challenge that the world faces. As for George Soros, well, your opinion, don't you think George Soros is right? After all, when Hindenburg, the short seller group, came out and said and accused the Adani group of accounting fraud and all of that, didn't the Indian authorities say this was an attack on India? And is it not the case that the rise of Gautam Adani, coincides with the rise of Narendra Modi since he became prime minister in 2014? The two of them are not just from the same place, Gujarat. What Modi has been promoting is what is called crony capitalism. So to that extent, it will look like George Soros is right. And, the Hindenburg group may well be right about that close connection between Gautam Adani and Narendra Modi. So whatever the Indian authorities say, the facts suggest otherwise. And then finally, precious metals have gone down. Everybody is waiting for Fed's minutes and all of that. Now, this projection that inflation must come down to 2%, is it not a myth? What is the formula for saying inflation must be around 2%? What if it is at 6%? What if it's at 5%? Who has determined that is too high and that 2% is the magic number?
I don't know why 2% is the magic number. It's something which most central banks agreed on, didn't they? I mean, the ECB, the UK central bank, the Fed agreed on a 2% years ago. I mean, maybe it's time to recalibrate that, or maybe it's the time to be slightly more selective in what adds to that inflationary basket. I mean, these are very big questions. I still maintain that yes, I get the rate of inflation, but it doesn't refer to the cost of living really, and the cost of living is getting higher and higher. So it's not just, although it's an official measure of the rise in price increases, it doesn't necessarily reflect what the man or woman in the street is actually feeling as a result of all the turmoil in the world at the moment. As far as George Soros is concerned, I would just repeat, I wouldn't like to take sides in what's going on there. Maybe Adani needs that sort of connection with Modi. All Soros is saying is that what we're seeing there is, as you quite rightly observe, a conjunction of these two big powers in India, and it's stifling India's wishes, or at least the voters' wishes, that I understand it, for democracy. That's what he's saying, and India's saying, mind your own business, George. I mean, that's where we are right now. Who's right? I don't know. I'm not unfortunately a close observer of Indian politics, but I can tell you that George Soros will be listened to in the financial markets around the world, and will be listened to should India come to organizations like the IMF. It shouldn't, because it's a nuclear power, but who knows? But it might be wanting more aid, and I think certainly any lack of democracy in the country would be frowned upon by any of the monetary authorities in the world.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, everybody. We begin with inflation. The IMF Article 4 consultation with Nigeria that just concluded this month, saying that the inflation metrics are outdated. We don't need the IMF to tell us this. We've already been talking about this for, well over a year. I think, let me play this clip. I've played this clip, I think, about 3 or 4 times. But once again, here is Bismarck Rewane on the Global Business Report talking about the need to reconstitute the inflation basket.
There are two things here. One, there's a question of data integrity, which Nigeria has not been known to be a unique example of integrity, not only in data, but in every other thing. So yes, we have our reputation, which lives ahead of us in so many respects. So that's one. Two is the fact that the inflation basket is supposed to be reconstituted every 5 years. Naturally, your behavioral patterns, your demography, in fact, your life expectancy and all of that. Yeah. So the last time changes over time. Therefore, you need to reflect that in terms of changing your consumer basket. Okay. Even if it's just tweaking it a little bit. But the last time we did that was 2009. So quite frankly, going by the 5-year cycle, we are due for a third review, but we haven't done anything about it.
Yeah.
So what we sought to do at Financial Derivatives was to look at the basket as it was constituted in 2009 and try to rudimentarily just alter the basket.
Yeah.
Crude alteration, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And when we use the basket, right, of the NBS, it came out at 18.6. By the way, our projection is that it's going to come out at 19 point something using that. But then when we try to reconstitute it, it showed about 45.64.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so big difference. That's one. 2, then we went further, because that's even using their own basket. We went further to do what we call a synthetic basket. The synthetic basket now tells us something much more frightening, which came out about 84%.
Good Lord.
But again, you're comparing the price of a product last year with the price of a product this year.
Right. It's funny. I had one of Cyril Ramaphosa's economic advisors on the Global Business Report yesterday. He's an agricultural economist. And I asked him, interestingly enough, about the inflation basket in South Africa. 35% weighting for food inflation goes to meat. 21% goes to bread and cereals. I think about 12 or 13% to fruits and vegetables. So when meat moves, and it's a reflection of what's on the ground there. So that basket needs to be updated. Here's what the IMF said particularly with the consumer price index in Nigeria. So this is the Article 4. This is what constitutes exactly what they reviewed with respect to what's going on. But if we take a look at what they said, Nigeria's official monthly consumer price index, a composite of urban and rural price data, is available on a timely basis. So that's fine. However, the weights are based on expenditures derived from the 2003 to 2004 National Consumer Expenditure Survey. So that's about 20 years old. The weights are severely outdated and are not representative of current expenditure patterns, spending patterns. Outdated weights can introduce a bias into the index, that's the CPI. The update of the CPI using new weights from the 2018 National Household Living Standard Survey is still ongoing. Compilation on an updated producer price index is what they said they will assist the MBS in putting together. So, when we talked about this, what was it last week when I said, how is it that Nigeria can have year-on-year inflation of 21.8 and Ghana, which is 45 minutes by flight and where we trade goods and services, is 53? And I showed you that tweet from our frequent guest, Kelvin Emmanuel, who's the CEO of Dairy Hills, who is deep in agriculture. Tweeted when Ghana released their inflation figures, maybe sarcastically, maybe tongue-in-cheek, maybe he was serious, saying at least Ghana is honest about their inflation figures. So maybe it's not a question of being deceptive. It's just a question of between what Bismarck Rwanda is saying and what the IMF is saying. You need to reconstitute your baskets to reflect what really inflation is. We go from that to education. Nairalytics, which is the analytical arm of Nairametrics, took a look at CBN data on education. That is foreign outflows for education for Nigeria. We talked about this about a year ago or so when the last data came out for 2021. So outflows came to about $1.3 billion on education from January through September of 2022 using central bank data. Now, interestingly enough, it is 26% year-on-year lower than what was spent in 2021. So the year-on-year figure, I think in 2021, January through September, was 1.8 billion. So why was there a drop? Now you get this is official figures from the central bank. So you're looking at PTA and those allowances that are given at the official exchange rate. Now we know that not everyone got the foreign exchange that they needed, either for education or for healthcare or the likes. So they had to go to the parallel market, and so the parallel market is not included in this data. Central bank, as we know, does not recognize the parallel market. But if some of that demand trickled off into the parallel market and was not counted in, then that might be able to explain the 26% year-on-year drop in that amount that's being spent. But still, when you look at the impact on our balance of payments, which records our transactions versus other countries, so you're spending 1.3 billion educating your children, how much are foreigners spending educating their kids in your country? It's completely lopsided, right? And then there's the impact on our foreign reserves and all that and the like. So there's that. Finally, in Kenya, in the Senate on ICT is talking to the Central Bank of Kenya on legalizing cryptocurrencies. So they're having ongoing conversations with them. It's very interesting. They're having this conversation when Bitcoin has jumped to 24,000, when it was languishing at 16,000, 17,000 for pretty much, last how many months. The conversation went there. The question though is this: is cryptocurrency a currency or a security? They're having these debates in the United States with Mr. Gensler of the SEC. They're having these debates in Europe. That is it. And because of the volatility and the fact that it is not stable and people profit off of the volatile swings, you can argue that it's a security. But then the fact that you can maybe use it for purchases here and there, it's a legal, it's all up in the air.
It's both. It's just like what dollar has become in Nigeria.
Yeah,
security and
you can
currency, when you want to have online dollarized transactions.
Yeah.
But real quickly.
We don't have time, unfortunately.
Oh, good.
We are completely out of time. But
Just
thank
like
you
yesterday.
very much.
Don't worry, we'll find one of these
We'll
days.
take it
Thanks so
from
much.
here.